This morning, we're focusing on budget matters, and we're starting a conversation on youth education and climate change. And so joining us this morning to talk more about it is economic development advocate Ruqayyah Scott, who holds a BSc in economics with a minor in environmental economics. She's currently pursuing a Master's of Science in Development Statistics at the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies, or SALISES, at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. Ruqayyah, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us. I like that we're starting it this morning with a focus on the youth. But before we get into that, tell us in terms of, as it relates to a young person looking at the budget, paying close attention to the budget every single year, what are you hoping are at least 3 items we see on the budget when the Minister of Finance reads it this afternoon?
I think in general, young people are looking for hope. They're looking for a brighter future. And in terms of looking for a brighter future, we want to focus on the cost of living and our standard of living. I think that is very important. Climate change is another factor that is extremely important. I mean, we all know how hot it's been recently, and that's another factor that we're also closely looking at. And then crime. Crime is also extremely important. And you know, young people across Trinidad and Tobago and across the Caribbean are simply looking for a brighter future. They want to know that after they study, after they earn their trade, when they start to work, they want to know that they will be living in a country, in a society where they can function normal and they can do the things that they want to do. They don't have to study about crime. They don't have to study, you know, about the drastic impacts of climate change. They want to know that they will be protected and they can thrive in such an environment.
Yeah. Now, as it relates to, let's look at one of them. You mentioned crime. Crime is a hot topic for everyone for obvious reasons.
Yes.
What more can be done as it relates to crime? Is it that we're seeing more budgetary allocation? Are we seeing more programs? I mean, how can we, you know, really attack crime to ensure that those numbers go down, especially as it relates to homicides?
So what I think we typically do in this country is that we focus on after, what happens after the crime is committed. But I think what we need to shift our focus on is preventative measures to ensure that these crimes don't happen in the first place. Now, I may not be able to give the answer to that because I'm not a criminologist, but what I can say, and I think, you know, I think most people, you know, would agree with me, is that crime is not black and white. It is a multifaceted issue, and for that we need a multifaceted approach. So it's not just spending money on security, it's not just spending money on the justice system, but it's also preventative action, you know, and that comes from social development, that comes from culture, that comes from education, it comes from various things. So I think we need to possibly shift our lens when it is we speak about crime, because we always speak about it in a after the fact type of way, and then we're always having this conversation about, you know, crime starts from the family, from single parents, which is not the right narrative, because all criminals don't have the same family background, you know. So those things, I just don't think they're beneficial to the conversation, and I think we should probably focus on preventative measures instead.
Yeah. Now, last year the education sector got $7.4 billion. They got the largest piece of the pie. If they were to get that figure this year or even more, what are some of the projects or some of the areas you think the education minister can focus? And of course, I know you're not into education, but as it relates specifically to economic development.
So education is by far one of the most influential, impactful tools that we can use to develop any economy across the globe. And for that, education needs to be transformational, but it needs to be futuristic as well. Our education system has you know, been comfortable, if I may say so. It's been existing in a space of comfort where we do what we normally do. But the reality is the labor market has drastically changed, and we need to prepare our young people for that world. We need to prepare young people for the storm that AI is now going to have, and has already, you know, taken its mark, just not in Trinidad and Tobago, but it's
not
definitely,
yet.
It's definitely taken the entire world by storm.
Yes.
But we have to prepare our young people for the future world of work. So what I want to see in education, I want us to start talking about new subject areas where we can get young people to really learn the tools and trade of tomorrow. But also that doesn't mean we have to take out what we have, you know. It's just let's try to use technology and what we already have, you know. I also think we need to ensure that our education system is tailored towards students with different learning abilities. It's always been the same, you know, very much focused math and English, very focused on examinations. But I mean, I can tell you that examinations are possibly not the best way to test someone's intelligence.
Of course,
you know?
and they've been having that conversation.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I, I have very, unpopular opinions on the SEA exam as well, and that is something that, our Caribbean neighbors are also exploring about removing that exam and putting something else in place. Now, whilst I am an advocate for that, I fully well understand that probably we're not there yet as a country, but these are areas I think that we can definitely focus on, new ways of learning and also incorporating the tools that we would need for the future.
Yeah. And as when the topic of education, Ruqayyah, I know that Ainka is standing by with 3 students. Remember, Ainka is on the field at City Gate, and so we go to her now. Ainka, tell us what's happening.
So, of course, from the sounds behind me, you can tell that we are at Citygate, the bus terminal specifically. And because our next guest is going to be focusing on youth, climate change, and the likes, I thought it was apt that we talk to some of the students who are on their way to school right now. So I'm going to first speak to actually, I didn't catch your name. What is your name, sir?
Johnson.
And what school are you going to?
Trinity College, Mocha.
All right, so Trinity College is telling me today, what are your hopes or the things that you hope to see emphasized in the budget this year?
Gas decrease.
Ooh, gas decrease. Why is that important to you?
Because I find that the gas is too expensive and some people kind of may not afford it. So I think if they decrease the gas, it would be better for a lot of people in Trinidad today.
Valid point, valid point. Nothing specific to education or anything like that, seeing that you're still in school?
To my knowledge, no. For me, no.
All right, thank you very much. Let me let you get to school. Now we're heading over to St. Anthony's because I am talking to whom?
Shailan Lucas.
All right, now Shailan, what are you hoping to see emphasized on the budget?
Food prices decrease because it is overbearing. Because, like, say for example, if I go in any shop or in grocery,
Things expensive.
yeah.
Things expensive. I totally understand that, and it's important that you're attuned to that. So I know you're going to be watching the review, but let me hop across to my friend from Mubkarapo West, is it? Yep. Yes? What is your name?
Ariel Tusi.
Ariel, what do you think, or what would you like to see them emphasize in the budget today?
Well, I want them to increase on the transportation because sometimes when it have school children who don't have money and they have to come in the terminus, PTSC have to send bus right through because Diego Martin is a school children down Diego Martin who don't get transportation to come and to go back because my brother down Diego Martin, them don't get bus really like they used to again. So I want PTSC and all the other people who watching this to back up on the transportation and increasing the more transportation and PTSC to get more buses right through every day.
All right, so you heard it straight from the mouth of the youth, who we will be talking about later on today, but it's all about making sure that increases in the amount of buses, decreases in food prices, and even better allocations come to you guys. So Kimberly, when next you're chatting with your guests, tell them what the youth want to hear.
And Ruqayyah, I know you heard that, but one of the things he mentioned, of course, and I want to tackle early, transportation.
Yeah.
How can we tackle that transportation? Because some would say that the buses are working, they're there, but remember it's also the time of the buses and in the really urban areas or the rural areas, I would say. And so how can that be a focus as it relates to economic development?
I think transportation is about coordination. And I think effective coordination can ensure that people need to reach where they need to reach at a particular time. If you look at the public transportation system in some more developed countries, it is amazing how they work. They even have apps when you can track when the bus is coming and the buses are on time. It says 6:59, the bus is going to be there at 6:58. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think, again, it's about using technology and it takes effective planning as well. We can't do things the way that we used to do it. But what I have to say is that you heard straight from all of the young people. Young people, one, know what they're talking about, and two, we're looking for hope and aspiration. And I think that is very, very important. And I wish, our politicians would listen to young people more seriously because we have great suggestions and we're willing to put in the work to help, see those goals fall through.
Exactly. And I like that you mentioned puts in the work because you have the ideas, you have the aspirations. You may not be at a space or position to make it happen, but then where do you go when you have these ideas? And then how can you be a part of the action that needs to take place as a young person?
So that question is, I think, a question for our members of parliament and our senators, because we are part of youth groups, we're part of national youth councils, we're part of clubs, and we do the advocacy work. I mean, I myself in my undergrad program did advocacy work for the entire 3 years of my undergrad program.
What does that look like?
We go on television, we go online,
Yes.
we write blogs,
Yes.
we write, we speak, we hold public forums at the university, and we're always speaking, we're always talking, we're always trying to get our voice heard. But after that, there's only so much that we can do. We need to be given the opportunity to actually have a seat at the table and to be able to make that change. That is, getting young people involved in politics, voting for young people, approving young people at the screening process for them to go up as candidates. All of those things are what we can do to get young people in actual positions to actually make that change.
Yeah. Now, as an economist, you would understand inflation very well.
Yes.
I know that one of the things that is on everybody's lips is minimum wage. But
Yes.
remember, if you increase the minimum wage, you put more spending power, inflation, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Is there a sweet spot that we can get in terms of ensuring that our workers are paid, that they can afford to live, but also where we wouldn't see a price gouging or a price increase?
Now, two things that you mentioned. One was price gouging, and the second was ensuring that people can afford the lifestyle. The reality is prices have skyrocketed, not just in terms of food, but other commodities as well, goods and services. And people need to live. And the wages that we currently live on, not everyone can afford a comfortable standard of living, and that is a problem. And as long as that is a problem, that should signal to us that there is a problem with the wages that people are being paid. And I think there is no argument about that. However, in terms of the price gouging, now a lot of people think that the prices of private goods and services are in the hands of the state, but that's not necessarily so. So what we also need to do is that the state probably needs to appeal to the private sector to please not engage in price gouging. Right? Now, the state cannot demand a particular pharmacy to drop their prices.
Because I was just about to say that there is currently a division who have the conversations with the private owners, and they encourage them not to increase their prices.
Exactly.
But as you rightly said, that's the private sector.
It's the private sector. So at this time, we're not speaking to the Minister of Finance. We're speaking to the private sector that you need to do something with your prices as well. Now, understanding global conditions, this is not a Trinidad and Tobago problem. Now, this is a difficult one to manage. This is not a Trinidad and Tobago problem. Prices have been rising globally because of the pandemic and because of other international conflicts. And I think it's important for us to be cognizant of that. But I do think it's important for us to recognize that our wages are really not where they should be. A lot of people complain that gas has gone up, food has gone up, everything has gone up besides my salary.
So can we raise the salary and find a way to ensure that prices aren't increased? Is that ever going to be a possibility, or is it that we're going to see inflation regardless?
I think that is the ideal. That's what we would love to happen. But inflation is all market conditions, and government can perhaps intervene and try to ensure that prices do remain stable. And I think, in terms of food prices, we definitely we've not seen flour going up to $100 for a small bag,
Yeah.
So I definitely think that the government can and will ensure that at least in terms of food prices will remain, possibly stable, especially within the next 2 to 3 year period. But I definitely can't say that we would not see inflationary market conditions. I think that is utopic, of course, but we have to keep in mind that this is not a Trinidad and Tobago problem. Now, if it was a Trinidad and Tobago problem, then we could be like, all right, here's what's going on. We need to get the state to do something, but it's a global problem. And global problems sometimes requires global solutions, but it also means that our world has to now be formed in a different way. There's a lot of conflict that's going around globally, and it's not just going to end tomorrow, so we have to keep that in mind. And I would encourage people to keep that in mind as well.
Let's look at climate change around the world again, global problem.
Correct.
We are trying to keep it below that 1.5, right?
Yes.
What can we do now as a country as it relates to, let's say, a ministry standpoint to ensure that we do what we need to do to keep our levels down?
So there are two things when it comes to climate change. There's adaptation and then there's mitigation. Adaptation deals with us adapting to the changes, and mitigation deals with preventing those impacts in general. Now, in terms of mitigation, yes, there is a lot that we can do, but we need to remember that Trinidad and Tobago is a small island developing state, and climate change was not caused by us. We always have to keep that in mind. So the world is asking for countries that are most vulnerable to do the most. And that is simply not realistic. Trinidad and Tobago cannot allocate $50 billion to one climate change initiative. It's just not possible. But what we do need to do is that we can focus on adaptation. We can focus on doing little things that can possibly help in terms of reducing our personal consumption. Because, things like, reducing the use of plastic and styrofoam on a very basic, simple way. But also renewable energy transitioning. I think that is important. There are other Caribbean islands that you go to, and from the time you land, there's solar panels everywhere. What is so different with Trinidad and Tobago? Yes, it is going to be expensive, but I think that is one of a very easy way. It's one step ahead for us to become more environmentally friendly. I think that is important. I think it's for us to take these little steps, because climate change was not caused by us. It's those huge factories and industries in more developed countries that are actually, pledging climate finance to, small island developing states. But I don't want us to have that narrative to think that we are responsible for the climate crisis, or we are responsible for solving it. Yeah. I think it's important for us to recognize that we can do what we can do. And I think from a ministry level, it's to just push those programs and in order to get us to be more environmentally friendly. Yeah. That comes with the green tax as well, ensuring that companies are also more environmentally friendly, and encourage environmental activities to ensure that we get our environmental sustainability where it needs to be. Yeah. And I think it's time for us to partner with some of our international players as well to access that sort of climate financing to fund these projects as well, and to fund future ones.
Yeah, I know that Prime Minister Mia Mottley was very vocal about having us in the Caribbean, in the region, get that sort of funding. So it's a very hot button topic for her and the rest of us in the region. But quickly as well, we were talking offsets, and you were mentioning that we don't necessarily have a problem with budgetary allocation, but we have a problem with the implementation of what we are talking about. So we have the advocacy, we have the money, we're putting it in these programs, but what is the follow-through? What is that implementation process? And before you go, I want you to speak some more about that.
Sure, no problem. So ever since, when I speak to older persons, I speak to my parents, uncles, aunties, we've always been talking about diversification. We've always been talking about tourism and agriculture and youth, and we've always been having these conversations. So Trinidad and Tobago does not have a shortage or a drought of intelligent minds, exceptional ideas, and so forth. But what we do have a problem with is implementation. So there are so many programs and projects that simply cannot get off their feet, or get off their feet and are not effectively implemented. So I think that is where our problem lies, even in terms of the SEA. You know how many teachers and experts have laid out a plan to possibly transition from that, but where is it, So I think Trinidad and Tobago has an implementation problem, and I don't think that is a political thing. I think that's a governance structure thing, because party come, party go, the institution of a ministry or a statutory agency or board technically remains the same. Now, obviously, it takes some political will to change that, but unless our governance structure changes in terms of how things are implemented, monitored, evaluated, we're not going to see any drastic changes in Trinidad and Tobago. At least I don't think so. We really need to focus on our implementation, because that is where the problem lies. We go on television, politicians make these, very large announcements, and we get happy. We are like, yes, we're looking forward to that. Yes. But we need to see the implementation of it. And I think that is where we get real change.
I think one of the responses to that, of course, would be the reform that the government was talking about, the local government election. So we look forward to see how that comes to fruition. Ruqayyah, always a pleasure to have you in with us this morning. Thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts, and we look forward to some of more of that advocacy from the young people as they look forward to get their seat at the table.
Thank you very much.
And that, of course, was economic development advocate Ruqayyah Scott, just talking about some of the key sectors: climate change, youth, of course, and education, as we look forward to our budget presentation this afternoon. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a break and be right back. Stay with us.